Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And in our continuing series on Nobel Prize winners, we're going to open tonight with Imre Kertesz, who died recently at the age of 86. He was the Hungarian writer who won the 2002 Nobel Prize for Literature for writing novels based on his experiences as a Holocaust survivor after surviving the concentration camps in World War II. Here's a Reuters report on the death of Nobel Prize winner Imre Kertesz.
Hungarian novelist and Auschwitz survivor Imre Kertesz has died at the age of 86 after a long illness. He is seen here in 2002 when he won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Judges said his works portrayed the Nazi death camps as, quote, the ultimate truth about how low human beings could fall. Here he comments on how it felt to win the award. My first reaction, of course, was a feeling of a very nice surprise and of joy and a tiny bit of fear with all these journalists. After winning the Nobel Prize, Kertesz spent nearly a decade in Berlin, where he produced his last works. His books enjoyed success among the German public. As a Jew, he had experienced persecution by the Nazis. As a writer, he lived under repressive Hungarian communist rule. Kertesz wrote about his life in both direct and delicate prose. In 2002, he said success in Germany had historical significance. I had a lot of support and understanding from Germany. I live in Germany and my publishers are German. I seem to be very popular among the Germans, and with the German language, I seem to have found the best possible way of overcoming the consequences of the Holocaust. Kertesz was the first Hungarian to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. In his work, he returns repeatedly to the experience of Auschwitz. The camp in German-occupied Poland was the site of the deaths of more than 1 million Jews and other victims of Hitler's Third Reich.
Well, the best obituary on Imre Kertesz was from the Jerusalem Post, and I'll read a little bit of that. Imre Kertesz became a Nobel laureate for works that judges said portrayed the Nazi death camps as the ultimate truth about how low human beings could fall. As a Jew persecuted by the Nazis and then a writer living under repressive Hungarian communist rule, Kertesz went through some of the most acute suffering in the 20th century and wrote about it in both direct and delicate prose. He won the $1 million Nobel Prize for writing that upholds the experience of the individual in the face of a barbaric and arbitrary history, the Swedish Nobel Academy said when it awarded literature's highest honor. In his work, Kertesz repeatedly returns to the experience of Auschwitz, the camp in German-occupied Poland, where more than 1 million Jews and other victims of Hitler's Third Reich died. He is one of the few people who managed to describe that in a way which is immediately accessible to us, those who have not shared that experience. Horace Engdahl, permanent secretary of the Academy, said in 2002, Kertesz's defining first novel, Fatelessness, a first-person story of a boy's survival in a concentration camp, was written between 1960 and 1973 and rejected for publication at first by Hungary's communist regime. It was finally released in 1975, but initially largely ignored by the public. Kertesz wrote about that in Fiasco in 1988, seen as the second volume of the trilogy closed by Kaddish for a Child Not Born, written in 1990. Kaddish is the Jewish prayer for the dead, and in that novel, Kaddish is said by the protagonist for the child he refuses to beget in a world that allowed Auschwitz to exist. Born in Budapest in 1929, Kertesz was deported to Auschwitz in 1944 and on to the Buchenwald concentration camp in eastern Germany, whose prisoners were liberated by U.S. forces in 1945. He returned to Hungary and worked as a journalist, but lost his job in 1951 when his paper adopted the Communist Party line. Kertesz was the first Hungarian to win the Nobel Literature Prize, though Hungarians had already won Nobel Science Awards. He spent the better part of the decade after winning the award in Berlin, where he produced his last works, and later returned to Budapest. Well, we're going to move on now to Ronnie Corbett, who died recently at the age of 85, not that well known in the United States. But along with Ronnie Barker, he was one of the Two Ronnies, and they were one of the great comedy duos in British television history. Here's Matthew Bannister from the BBC4 Last Word on the death of Ronnie Corbett.
Now, the cream of British comedy talent queued up to pay tribute to Ronnie Corbett, who's died aged 85. One of the greatest entertainers this country has known, said his friend Sir Bruce Forsyth. Ricky Gervais hailed the lovely, funny legend Ronnie Corbett, and Steve Coogan said his passing marked the end of an era of comedy loved by the whole nation, regardless of age, creed or class. Ronnie Corbett was born in Edinburgh. Even as an adult, he was only 5 foot 1 inch tall, but did his shortness affect his childhood?
Funnily enough, I don't remember ever being worried about my lack of height, not growing up. My auntie worried more than me. My aunt sent away for this course, of course, 2 guineas for a magazine, and I had to repeat every day, and every way I'm getting taller and taller, and stick a pin in the wall, and all you were doing was stretching yourself, actually. So that didn't work.
Ronnie's fellow comedian, Arthur Smith.
He used the fact that he was quite a short man to great advantage. Of course, comedians do, you use what you've got. He played the sort of small, diffident man.
I am middle class. I know my place. I look up to them both, but I don't look up to him as much as I look up to him.
He played the working man in the Frost Report, where with John Cleese and Ronnie Barker, where being the shortest one, he was the working class one, and he always delivered the punchline superbly.
I still look up to him, so I still look down on him. I know my place.
And that old jingle jangle gets my sheets in a tangle, but I don't take my boots off in bed.
But it was his partnership with Ronnie Barker that took Ronnie Corbett into the hearts and living rooms of millions. The Two Ronnies performed sketches which have become comedy classics. Jim Moyer was the BBC's head of variety at the time and worked closely with Ronnie Corbett.
Although a great star and made it look very easy being a star, beneath the surface he got to be a star because of all the very, very hard work that he put in. Ronnie was a stickler for rehearsal. He worked very hard at the physical act of comedy, and it was in the written word that he applied himself alongside Ronnie Barker, ensuring that the material was of the very highest quality that they could get.
No, 4 candles.
Well, there you are, 4 candles.
No, 4 candles. Candles for forks.
If he had to learn the script, he was word perfect the next day, having been given the script the night before. An extraordinarily hard-working man.
Thank you. Here is a very funny story, which got very big laughs when I told it last year in Las Vegas.
Then, of course, he would sit and start on an anecdote, but kind of disappear off into something else and then come back to it at the end, which was done extremely artfully, although it didn't look like it.
I say Las Vegas, it wasn't actually in Las Vegas, obviously. More units that are outside Las Vegas. Islington, actually.
He had a favourite restaurant just off Jermyn Street, Queen's Restaurant. We would often meet there. He was highly intelligent and articulate, had views on all that was going on in the world beyond the realms of show business.
He used to turn up to various comedy shows that he had no need to and watch them. He liked to keep abreast of what was going on in comedy, and he was never anything other than utterly charming and generous in a way that quite a lot of comedians aren't. He never, he never played the big star or anything. He never played the big anything. He was the kind of small man become comedy.
And we've also heard that in Hounslow this evening, a mad dog bit an income tax inspector. After being given injections and treatment for shock, the dog has been allowed to go home.
In one sketch, he jokingly called himself Ronnie Goliath Corbett, a self-mocking name, but indeed in many ways he was a Goliath of comedy and will be remembered by the viewing millions with esteem, pride and deep affection.
I know my place.
We're going to close tonight with Dr. Joseph Medicine Crow, who died recently at the age of 102. Crow Indian, he was the last Plains warrior chief, and he was also historian of the Crow tribe with relatives who were scouts for General Custer at the Little Bighorn. The Crow did not get along with the Cheyenne and the Sioux, so they sided with the U.S. Army in the territorial disputes of the 1870s. Here's Dr. Crow.
My people, the Crow Indians, call me High Bird, after an illustrious clan relative who was a great warrior at one time. But of course, my tribal enrollment name is Joseph Medicine Crow. Medicine Crow is the name of my grandfather, Chief Medicine Crow. I'm probably the only one who has connection with this Custer battlefield. I've known 3 of the Crow Indian scouts who fought here. White Man Rusty, my granduncle. I know Curly, and I knew Harry Markerson. I didn't know White Swan, so I knew the scouts who were here. I think I probably know more about the battle than anybody else at this time. I'm the Crow tribal historian.
Well, he's also a Plains warrior chief, and he fulfilled the criteria to become a Plains warrior chief, fighting for the United States in World War II in northern France and Germany.
Fighting in France with the same 103rd Infantry Division was a soldier with an unusual name, Joseph Medicine Crow. Born on the Crow Indian Reservation near Lodge Grass, Montana in 1913, he attended a Baptist mission school, was the first of his people to graduate from college, and was studying for an advanced degree in anthropology when the war began. But he had also been raised by his elders in the warrior tradition.
My grandfather trained me to be a warrior. The Crow Indians were so-called warlike. They're militaristic from way back.
The Crows had defended their lands against the Lakota and Cheyenne for generations, and had allied themselves with the United States during the Plains Wars. One of Joe Medicine Crow's grandfathers had been a scout for George Armstrong Custer before the Battle of the Little Bighorn.
My paternal grandfather, great war chief Medicine Crow, he was considered the bravest warrior of all time, so he was also my inspiration to follow in his footsteps. He kept training me to become a warrior. In order to have status in becoming a warrior, climbing up the ladder of success to become a chief, he must perform certain dangerous war deeds.
To be considered a chief, a Crow warrior had to touch a living enemy, take an enemy's weapon, steal an enemy's horse, and lead a victorious war party. Whenever he went into battle in Europe, Joe Medicine Crow would paint red stripes on his arms beneath his uniform, and he carried in his helmet a sacred yellow-painted eagle feather provided by a Sundance medicine man to shield him from harm. He would need that power. He was asked to lead a 7-man squad carrying explosives through a wall of artillery fire to blast German positions along the Siegfried Line. Then he helped capture a German village.
We hit a German town, and I was assigned to take the back alley and come behind the Germans who were in the main street. So I did. I ran up there, and I saw an opening there, a gate there. There's a wall there. So I ran up there, and a German soldier was running there. We bumped heads. Helmets, and I let him go.
Without quite meaning to, Joe Medicine Crow had performed 3 out of the 4 traditional war deeds he needed to become a war chief like his grandfather. He had led a successful war party. He had touched an enemy warrior and taken away his weapon. The only thing left was to capture some horses.
I was a scout for my company. We were going along the road on top of the mountain, small mountain, and I was ahead of my company, and I caught up with some horseback riders. And I had my field guys. I looked at them, they're Germans, so I followed them.
The Germans took over a farmhouse. The horses were pastured outside, some 50 of them.
I have an idea. Said, if you give me 5 minutes before jump off, I'll stampede their horses. So I went behind there and got a horse, and I put my little rope, made an Indian bridle, double half-hitch. I got on it, and I stampeded the horses out of there. So I headed out, and I looked at them, and they were beautiful. And the one I was riding was a sorrel with a blade, so I felt pretty good.
When Joe Medicine Crow returned home after the war, a tribal ceremony was held to welcome him.
The old elders wanted to know what my war deeds. And I started thinking about it, I mentioned those horses. You have completed the 4 deeds. Well, I never thought about it. So I guess you're looking at the last Plains Indian war chief.
Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. Joseph Medicine Crow was awarded the Medal of Freedom in 2009. We're going to close tonight with him singing a Crow song of praise.
Hey.